It just seems like that Shaman is playing by the rules a little bit too much, but we'll see if it can pull out a win for NightBreaker here. But it's going to be what looks to be Odd Rogue taking on the Spiteful Druid in game number 1. So NightBreaker deviating a little bit from the expected here.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, deviating from the expected in terms of the overall lineups that we're seeing from a lot of players, and also in terms of what I would expect him to ban, because to be honest, from what I've seen in a lot of Odd Rogue strategies, and maybe it's less so or different in Conquest to Last Hero Standing, but you try and beat Q-Block with it. That's kind of one of the big points of the deck, is it's too aggressive. You're supposed to beat Q-Block with it. Whether or not you actually do is another question, which is why it's such an underrepresented deck as compared to Quest Rogue. But it's an interesting strategy, and it looks like it's going to be, to be honest, in a pretty decent spot. I think it's, you know, a reasonable matchup against Spiteful Druid. Obviously, if this is a Quest Rogue from Zanananana, NightBreaker will be in a great spot with his Odd Rogue, but he has to get this victory first is the main thing.
Not poorly positioned whatsoever. I think when you do compare it directly to Quest Rogue, it is difficult to warrant not bringing that Quest Rogue.
Yeah.
But when you do slot in the Odd Rogue into your overall lineup, if you have a very aggressive strategy, it seems to fit right in. So now I'm almost questioning, what is NightBreaker's Warlock? Could
you think it's Zoo?
Oh. I don't know. I'm sure it's not.
Surely not.
I have thoughts.
What, so he could bring 4 kind of board-based aggressive decks, obviously with his Paladin being banned as well. It kind of makes sense, but the thing is, in Last Hero Standing, like, that would be a lot more effective in Conquest, because then you are hard targeting the Quest Rogue. That's kind of the point of your lineup. But obviously in Last Hero Standing, once a deck loses, it's gone. So it's, you know, you can't hard target one deck. It's about trying to make one deck that sweeps your entire opponent's field, which I don't think Odd Rogue is in a particularly good spot to do.
No, I would agree with that.
For me, it's kind of in the same spot as Control Mage, where, like, when you hear someone talk about it, it makes perfect sense, because you're like, it's got reasonable matchups against this, good against this, there's a point to bringing it. But in terms of the actual power level of the deck, I don't think it's quite good enough to be bringing to a tournament.
You want to bring those decks that just sometimes hit the nuts and completely blow out their opponent, like we saw in the previous match with Vince versus Savat. That Druid hit it 3 times in a row and absolutely destroyed those matchups. This Odd Rogue is very powerful, but I don't think it does anything that is particularly insane. Whereas Spiteful Summoner on turn 6, Kalistith on turn 2, is pretty crazy.
However, in this particular matchup, Spiteful on 6 is not what you're looking for, you know. A giant body is obviously good. You can start moving towards reverse lethals. And to be fair, NightBreaker has not accrued that much damage thus far. It's been a pretty slow start, even though he's filled out his mana very efficiently. The cards that Zanananana is going to be looking for are cards like this: Druid of the Claw, Saronite Chain Gang, Tar Creeper. Those powerful taunts that you can throw in your opponent's way start to weaken them a little bit, because obviously the value in an Old Rogue deck is incredibly low. They are going to run out of steam very quickly indeed.
And Zananana does need to be very aware of a potential Vilespine Slayer.
Very true.
In response to that Spiteful Summoner. NightBreaker does have that as an answer to anything that may be summoned from that Spiteful Summoner, including Tyrantus.
That could be pretty good.
It could be pretty good. Pretty good indeed.
As for NightBreaker, as you said, no Vilespine Slayer able to be thrown down right here, but, you know, getting the buff on the Fungal Mancer is kind of the most important thing I would argue you could do against this Druid deck, because it's unreactive. It cannot fight back against this board. It has to gain it back first. However, cards like Mind Control Tech are a pretty good way of doing so, which is why I love the hesitation here from Zanananana. Maybe shouldn't even have picked up that card at all, because when your opponent snap picks a card on turn 6 as Spiteful Druid, there's not much it could be. Whereas going for Druid of the Scythe into Mind Control Tech with a little splash of luck to get a good minion off of it feels way more powerful in this situation.
Zanananana was sold on playing that Spiteful Summoner, and then that Mind Control Tech was pretty much, I think, the only pickup he could have found that tempted him. But he ended up going for that initial Spiteful Summoner, hits the Emrys, and NightBreaker may have to clean this up using his own board state. There's no Vilespine, and there's nothing to combine along with it.
Excuse me, are you condoning trading with Odd Rogue?
You know,
this is so embarrassing.
Don't put words in my mouth, Jared. I would never suggest such a thing.
There is one place in this matchup. There is one place.
Okay, but we're going into turn 7.
Yes, that is true.
Malfurion the Pestilent is It's like pretty good.
It's a pretty good card.
It's like pretty defensive.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I mean, I'm not just saying, but...
So again, obviously all these minions are going through to face here. The decision there from NightBreaker was whether you go for, what, Deadly Poison to kill off... To kill off the Spiteful Summoner, or he could have gone for Blink Fox. So the benefit of this play is obviously only the Emeris can attack into the Tar Creeper, which is fantastic for you because that's a huge chump blocker you're throwing in the way to finish your opponent off on one of the subsequent turns. But the thing is, if you daggered up, sent that 2 to face and played Blink Fox instead and just completely ignored your opponent's board, you'd be pushing forward a pretty similar amount of damage anyway, keeping back a pretty similar kind of board because you would have played a 3-3 and an extra minion would have died.
Then Zanananana would be at 14. There'd be an additional 3-3 on the board. Granted, NightBreaker would have a 4-4 that would run into the Tar Creeper, get killed, Emeris connects. But NightBreaker is winning that race 9 times out of 10.
Exactly. Like, there's no punish for going wide on board because there's no plague. I mean, we assume there's no plague.
Shy of like double mind control tech. Getting the 2 most powerful minions on the board here.
I mean, he's got 5 minions anyway, so double MCT, like, he's playing into MCT no matter what he does.
Yeah.
Unless he full traded, which is obviously ridiculous.
And Zanananana does actually steal the weakest minion on the board. So now NightBreaker has 7 points of damage represented. Zanananana at 16. Now, Fearing the Pestilent can pull him up to 21, and then he can armor for an additional 3 every turn. See, now it's looking like NightBreaker's losing the race.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Now it transitions from trading because you want to keep your minions alive to trading because you don't want to die. You don't want to lose the race here. And it's just too much damage from the Spiteful Summoner, which is why going back to turn 6 for Zanananana, where he was considering either Druid of the Scythe plus MCT or going for the Spiteful Summoner. Now that I'm looking at it, it could have shaped out differently because there could have been a Leroy or something in his opponent's hand. But I like this a lot more because he really forced his opponent to not go to face, make these trades, which bought him more time anyway, as he would have got with the play of MCT and Druid of the Scythe a turn earlier. I think it's a really smart play here from Zanananana.
Yeah, very much rewarded. And now he has a relatively safe turn to put down Malfurion the Pestilent, get those 2 taunts up, and now just start armoring up every turn that he has the mana available. And it does look like Zanananana should win this resource war, considering he has another Spiteful, Grand Archivist, and 2 Ultimate Infestations in the deck. His density of draws is just going to be more powerful than NightBreaker's. I
would agree with you there. I was looking on that turn at maybe considering some other lines of play other than Malfurion, because with the freeze and just a regular old hero power, you could take out the Fungal Mancer, maybe get that Vicious Fledgling down to start threatening your opponent. But again, with these taunts in play, like you said, you're just not going to die at the moment, and eventually you'll just win. You just got to stay even on board, and you should be just fine.
This guy's toast.
I mean, this is still
a
really wide board for NightBreaker.
And Zanananana cannot rely on just hero powering for armor every single turn. It's not like Odd Hunter where you just have to outlast the hero power and you will eventually win. There's kind of more value than that deck because there's less charges, but still lower value overall than anything the Spiteful Druid is trying to throw down.
So what is NightBreaker really looking for here now? He could potentially get a large Edwin online.
Yeah.
He could draw Baku the Moon Eater. Oh,
that's pretty good. Yeah. That's kind of about as good as he could expect. And it activates the Elder Longneck, obviously, as well, because he's got a 5 attack minion in hand now. And I mean, even just something like Stealth would be pretty good here for, what, a Shadow Rager?
Yeah, 3 mana, 5/4.
Not bad at all.
That's a Lost Tall Strider right there. For 1 less mana.
For 1 less mana, yeah. Sounds pretty good when you put it that way.
And now it's looking like things have flipped again. This has been a rather even game, all things considered, and there's the blowout that you're kind of looking at. The longer this game goes on, the more likely it is that the Druid hits pay dirt, and that is it.
Yeah, oh man, that looks like a pretty good hand he's drawn as well. Sometimes after you play Ultimate Infestation, you get something like your other Ultimate Infestation and, your Spiteful Summoners, and you don't get a particularly strong hand. But if Zananan just goes for double Crypt Lord into anything, he's probably just going to win this game, because after that, he obviously never, ever, ever loses on value.
NightBreaker never did find either of those Vile Spine Slayers to sort of leverage that board state. He never found Leroy to be able to end the game very quickly.
I mean, again, we are assuming that Vile Spine Slayers are in the list. It's not...
We don't have them in front of us.
It's not a core card, I would say, but yeah, I would assume that it is going to be there.
I think you're hard-pressed to find
if he's banning...
reason not to play it.
It's true. And if he's banning Warlock, he's probably got more leverage to not play cards like Owl, which are a little bit lower value, and then maybe go for Vile Spine Slayer, because Vile Spine is obviously a lot worse against Warlock when you're usually hitting Void Lord, which you don't want the Death Rattle to go off anyway. But this looks like no matter what happens here, it's going to be very easy lethal on the following turn for Zanananana. As just to rub a little bit of salt in the wound.
Who doesn't like dinosaurs, you know? Maybe
NightBreaker
was like, hey, NightBreaker, Jurassic World 2 is coming out pretty soon. Just wanted to give you a little reminder. NightBreaker's like, oh yeah, thanks. I'm gonna pre-purchase my ticket.
I love dinosaurs, yeah.
I love Chris Pratt, you know? Like, he's probably a huge fan. All right.
Unfortunately, though, life did not find a way for NightBreaker as he throws it down. Zananan going up 1-0 and getting to play with his Spiteful Druid yet again, which we saw in the last series from Vin's up against Savat, was looking to be in a pretty good spot indeed.
Okay, so NightBreaker is desperately trying to prevent that same series from repeating itself now, and he has the Shaman and the Warlock. Savat also had the Shaman and the Warlock to try and combat that Druid after losing that first game. The Warlock had 2 Twisting Nethers in hand, had a Blood River Gul'dan, had a Voodoo Doll in the early start.
Wasn't even close.
Got killed on turn 7.
Yeah.
And then the Shaman, it tried really hard.
It really gave it a
really
good shot.
far.
And it's going to be Shudderwock Shaman?
Shudderwock.
Could it really be?
Yeah. Ooh, I wonder if it's the Elemental version. That's the build that I've been seeing most. I've been seeing the Elemental Shudderwock Shaman build, and Derek, it's so fun to watch and to play.
So this is like the new school of Shudderwock Shaman, where obviously in the first days of the meta, it was the full combo version, the most ridiculous version you could come up with. Firebloom, Harbinger, Murmuring Elemental, to get the full combo to go as consistently as possible. But this looks to me, Cora, to be like a, slightly more kind of just value-y, tempo-y version, where you're just playing stuff on the board and relying on Shudderwock to just be a good card.
Yeah, likely just more of a mid-rangey Shaman build, some anti-aggro board clearing tools like that Volcano. You've got Lightning Storms most likely. It's a cooler deck. It's definitely a deck that I was not expecting to see here today, but I do think that it has some merit. You can play Healing Rain, and then that does tend to get you through the mid-game into the late against aggro if you do have that in combination with some of those board clear tools.
However, while NightBreaker's obviously got a respectable hand to get things going, some good anti-aggro with Zap and some good late-game cards like Hagatha or even Volcano to an extent to deal with a large board, this is a pretty great hand for Zananan. He hasn't found his own Keleseth or Spiteful, which we've seen blow out several games so far today, but just curve. Like, this is just a good hand to be getting on with. You've got 1-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and then anything you get after that is just a bonus, really.
So if NightBreaker wants to commit both Zaps into this Crypt Lord and kill it outright with the Keleseth, he then can't play Saronite Chain Gang next turn. He could still Hero Power, but you're killing the Crypt Lord right now. However, then Zanananana gets to completely develop on his turn 3, and you can do nothing in response.
Yeah, I love the consideration from him there, because letting Crypt Lord grow actually feels really bad. Like, you don't have an answer to it at the moment, and it's kind of acting as an umbrella, not only against minions attacking in, but a Volcano umbrella to protect your other minions by having this massive health total and probably surviving through it. Maybe even protecting the Spiteful summoned minion once it comes down, now that we see that in hand for Zananan.
I've seen umbrellas that can protect very well from rain. Lava, a different story.
Less so, yeah. I mean,
it's a pretty good umbrella.
A house is an umbrella that protects against lava.
Does it, though?
It's made of big rocks? I don't know.
Have you heard of Pompeii?
Fair point. Fair point. I'll give you that one.
Didn't do it
Did not
very well.
work. Yeah, okay. Maybe just a little bit of lava.
Granted, that was a very long time ago.
They sucked at houses back then. Sucks to be Roman.
Yeah, our housing technology is, some would say, hundreds of years advanced over that.
But in this particular game, Zanananana is still looking to be in a pretty respectable spot, but NightBreaker definitely not falling too far behind as of yet. If he can find a way to lower this board health down to the point where Volcano would clear it after the Spiteful Summoner comes down, then he's looking to be in a pretty good spot because there's not too many powerful minions coming down outside of that quite yet. But having said that, that feels like it's a pretty tall order to actually accomplish at this point because Zanananana has got threat after threat after threat. He can throw down the Vicious Fledgling here, which demands an answer. He will go for the Spiteful Summoner, which demands an answer. If a NightBreaker goes too wide on the board to try and counteract that by developing his own board, then the Mind Control tech comes down. Zananana's got all corners covered here.
It is very difficult, in any case, to run the Druid out of resources when they have 2 copies of Ultimate Infestation and multiple methods of proccing it. You're going to have difficulty clearing them off of the board in any case, but that is a really good start.
It is indeed. And this is kind of the best way he could actually hope to fight back against Spiteful Summoner, kind of in the way that you fight back against Rin, where you just play pressure. You can't prevent them from playing it from hand, but you can prevent them from surviving once they do. And obviously, this is not enough pressure to push for lethal yet. And Zanananana can kind of play potentially tennis with that Vicious Fledgling, stealing it back with his own copy of Mind Control tech, but unlikely to get quite so good of a result.
It is sort of the modern day version of that Reno Jackson blowback. You get Reno down, you go up to 30, but your opponent has so much on board that they just end up killing you right through it. This is not maybe as extreme of a scenario, and I don't think by any means that if Zanananana puts down that Spiteful next turn, he's out of the game. In fact, he's probably just going to be ahead on board now that he has stolen that upgraded Mind Control tech. But going into the later turns of the game with both Volcano and Hagatha and now Kalamos, if that were activated, NightBreaker's got 3 very effective board clears in hand. That's
right, and that's the thinking for NightBreaker, isn't it? Is that he doesn't have to be leading on the board. If he's just in a decent spot on board, that's good enough for him here. He wasn't expecting to be ahead on board at this point, so the fact that he is even at least is a very good point for him, as Zanananana cannot wait to throw down that Spiteful Summoner. No matter what happens, nothing is changing his mind here.
He's getting that clicking finger ready, making sure the mouse works okay. Everything checks out. 6 mana, yep.
Tick. Doesn't have both Ultimate Infestations. Tick.
Tyrantus.
Tick.
He hopes. Honestly, Tyrantus or Deathwing, actually Ultrasaur here may be the best. It has the highest health total.
I generally find in the Spiteful decks that Ultrasaur is very rarely better than one of the 12/12s because the difference between 12 and 14 health is not that much, but 7 and 12 attack is huge. That's like maybe an extra
like
turn
5.
Your opponent does not have it. It's literally 5, actually.
Like 5. Yeah. It's like 21 versus like 24.
I can't tell if you're SpongeBob memeing me or not. But he does get the Ultrasaur there, and like you said, the difference between 12 and 14, not all too important. It's just a minion that's not going to die anytime soon unless a Hex comes down.
There's just too many stats on the board regardless.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the main point, isn't it? Volcano is not clearing this board no matter what shakes out here.
And with that Ultrasaur on the board, if NightBreaker even went for Volcano this turn, it's likely that the Ultrasaur would soak up enough damage that even the other minions on Zananana's side of the board probably would live too. Witchwood Piper draws the lowest cost minion in the deck, probably Firefly?
Firefly, yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
So if he could Witchwood Piper and Firefly this turn and set up for Kalamos.
That's what I'm looking at as well, and then go Kalamos for 12 healing, I guess, just to buy him another turn.
One of the best ways, though, to use that Firefly is to get Hagatha down and then to play Firefly Flame Elemental just for 2 spells.
I think that's a bit too greedy here. I think he has to survive. Like, step 1 is just survive, and then Hagatha, he just has to hope that the draws off the top will be enough anyway to keep him in the game. Because if you can go for Witchwood Piper, Firefly, survive until the following turn, Kalamos for 12 health, and then use that 7/7 body and the 4/4 and 2/3 from the Piper and Firefly to kill off enough stuff, then hopefully for him, Volcano should be able to clear off enough, as he just does not know what to go for. He was lining up for the Volcano right at the start, but does get the Firefly as we anticipated. And I think this is probably more consistent, because what is he hoping to do with the Volcano? Leave maybe just an Ultrasaur on board, but even that is... that's pretty optimistic, I think.
You're saying, I'm not going to play Kalamos or Hagatha next turn.
Right.
And I'm still leaving 7 attack on board to just keep punching face.
As Zananan picks up the Grand Archivist as well, obviously casting a copy of Ultimate Infestation from his deck to completely refill his hand, which is why he's just going nice and wide on the board here, filling out, trying to get rid of all the cards he doesn't need from his hand right now, because it's going to be a huge refill on the following turn no matter what. And the main thing as well is he's easily setting up lethal on this turn, unless something pretty dramatic happens from NightBreaker.
Okay, so NightBreaker can trade into that Crypt Lord, get down Hagatha.
Yeah.
That leaves 11 damage on board. NightBreaker goes to 18. And then Shudderwalk actually has the Hagatha battle cry
It does
after
indeed,
that.
yeah.
As
Which
well
is
as
pretty
Witchwood
good.
Piper, Firefly,
Yeah.
and Saronite Chain Gang.
The elemental chain is already broken though, so Kalamos cannot be used for like a couple turns at least. But if you're not going for Shudderwalk next turn, maybe Volcano could have been good if it wasn't a Grand Archivist coming down here. As Zananan does not even think about it, even though he's way more likely to hit one of his own things than his opponent's face. It's just the power of his following turn that makes this so easily worth it.
And it doesn't even matter if this hits one of the minions on board or his own face. It's going to summon the 5/5 Ghoul as well. And NightBreaker does not have the mana for double Volcano. And see, now you're kind of starting to see the whole goal of this Shaman deck. It is a Shaman deck that really thrives in the late game, but can have a difficult time getting through the early to mid game against very quick decks like the Even Paladin and this Spiteful Druid deck. Now, I do want to remind everybody, Spiteful Summoner is getting a nerf on the 22nd of May. It's going to be 7 mana instead of 6. Would that have changed the course of the last 5 games we've seen in our matches? Potentially?
Yeah, I think it would have done. This game in particular, he slammed it on 6 before he could even think about it. Whereas another turn of just mediocre plays from NightBreaker might have meant that Volcano could clear the board, or Hagatha could clear the board. Something like that was really quite drastically needed, actually, to pull things back.
And in the game we saw Vince versus Savat, the Druid versus the Warlock, it would have allowed for another turn. Twisting Nether could have come down.
Right.
So I do think that we're going to see a drop in the power level of this Druid deck. I don't think by any means that we're going to see this Druid deck go away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, you know, Spiteful Summoner is kind of the best bit about it, but that's just how you beat the kind of more slowly controlled decks. The majority of the time you're winning through just the power of your curving out in a very strong way, Malfurion, and just the sheer power of Ultimate Infestation as well. As Zananan does manage to take the victory there. The Hagatha putting up a good fight, but that Shaman, I don't know. I don't understand why you would bring that deck instead of an even Shaman at the moment. I don't think the fact that it curves out just so, I don't know, like apathetically, like it doesn't have enough conviction and power. Like you said, it's a fair deck in the early game. It's just playing reasonable minions early on. It's not doing the disgusting stuff that even Paladin can do with Blessing of Kings and Call to Arms and stuff like that.
Because it's cooler.
It is cool. I will grant you that. It gets a coolness factor of 10.
At least 12% cooler. All right, NightBreaker's left with just his Warlock now to try and get the sweep, the same position that Savat was in against Vince in the last match. And as we saw, Vince 3-0 swept Savat. Zanananana, will he do the same here? It's going to be a Cube Warlock instead of the Control Warlock that we saw from Savat. But Kaliseth coming down on turn 2, gonna mess up all that Defile and Hellfire math, and then undoubtedly there will be a Spiteful Summoner on turn 6. And
it's just Sod's Law at this point, isn't it?
that's all she wrote, folks.
Yeah. However, I think if we are going to see a hand like this from Zanananana, NightBreaker with the Q block is probably in a slightly better position than you would be as a control lock, because yes, you are getting a very early effect from Prince Kaliseth, but there's the potential for the Q block to just never let that actually have an effect. If you get Skull or Giant or Possessed Lackey, something like that early on, you can really start pushing towards your own win condition with a lot more conviction. here NightBreaker keeping the Defile, which, you know, obviously I can see the reasoning for. This deck curves out pretty well the majority of the time, but I don't know if it's to the point where Defile is worth keeping when you don't actually have any of your powerful win condition cards.
It's a difficult call to make, especially if you don't have that Kobold Librarian to manipulate the math a little bit on Defile. Zanananana may be able to avoid putting down a 1 health minion, although with this hand, it does seem like that Greedy Sprite's probably coming out on turn number 3.
Yeah, or even just with trading, like there's some way you'll be able to make, or even just Voodoo Doll, like Defile will be good in this scenario.
Okay, but now NightBreaker has 2 Defiles and Hellfire. Would he rather, you know, swap out one of those removal pieces for perhaps a Possessed Lackey? Probably.
Probably, yeah. The thing is, though, to point out here from NightBreaker, though we saw a cube, this deck is not necessarily either cube or control quite yet. We have seen a fair few control warlocks with cube thrown in there. It sometimes makes an appearance because going for cube and Dark Pact on a Void Lord is obviously tremendously powerful against the aggressive decks. You're just never going to be losing those kind of matchups. But with the Doomguard picked up off the top, I was kind of thrown into confusion a little bit with the Plated Beetle, which tends to be more of a control warlock card, but obviously has its spot in the cube block decks as we see here. Usually to give you more game against Aggro Mage and Mind Blast Priest, things like that, yeah.
Well, with Mistress of Mixtures rotating out, Cube Warlocks do kind of need something else to play in the early game, and they don't necessarily suffer from having a little bit of additional armor gain, so it's not a bad choice in Cube. It's obviously an automatic inclusion in control.
In this position, I think pretty much just has to pray that the Karma Police are not paying too close attention here, because a pickup of Ultimate Infestation off the top would be, I think, a very fair top deck, considering how Spiteful Druid has been doing so far today.
Yes, Karma Police. I just want to know that Prince Kalasath was played on turn 2 in like 5 out of 6 games. Nice. It's going to be an Ultimate Infestation draw on turn 6. Thank you. That would be some karmic retribution for sure. NightBreaker here going with that Mountain Giant to counter pressure on the board instead of just taking the easy Defile or Hellfire for clear. And yeah, that does signal go time for Zanananana, and likely going to be the Coin Grand Archivist next turn if he does not draw that Ultimate Infestation.
Interesting positioning there, however, with the Fungal Mancer, because he had the opportunity, depending on how he positioned his minions on the previous turn, to play around either Defile or Hellfire. He chose to play around Defile, looks like a little bit more heavily with this play, because he avoided leaving a 1 health minion. But if he'd wanted to play Hellfire, he could have buffed the Flame Elemental, bringing it up to 4 health, which would have meant he's a little bit less vulnerable against the Hellfire, and he has seen one Defile, no Hellfires, so maybe worth considering that he could have gone for a slightly less Hellfire, Defile vulnerable play. Yeah,
specifically looking at the percentages there, there's 1 more Hellfire than there is Defile remaining in the deck. Makes maybe a little bit more sense to play around, but obviously we can see NightBreaker has both cards in hand. Doesn't really matter in this case. So Zanananana considering making some trades here to hopefully land Grand Archivist onto one of these Mountain Giants. That would be the best possible scenario, and the more minions that he keeps up on his side of the board, the more likely that Grand Archivist Ultimate Infestations on one of those minions.
Right.
Would you favor just a full trade-off here?
No, it feels so bad. Like, so what, if you full trade in...
You can make it so that Ultimate Infestation would kill either of the Giants.
That is true.
Yeah.
That looks like what Zanananana is going for. Yeah, okay. I like this more. I like this more, because if you go for the full trade into 1 and you miss, which you likely will, then it just trades into your Archivist and you're feeling absolutely dreadful.
I mean, there's still 3 places this could go. Ooh. All right, never mind. Zanananana hits one of the Giants, exactly what he wanted there. But now, important to note, 1 Ultimate Infestation gone, 1 Ultimate Infestation in hand. Those Spiteful Summoners are just 6 mana 5/5s. Now maybe NightBreaker's got that little bit of wiggle room that he needed.
He kind of does, because he can obviously trade off here. It would kill off his own Giant, though, and Zanananana has a super aggressive hand. I mean, in a lot of the Spiteful Druid decks, we've seen Leroy being phased out in favor of Druid of the Claw. Zanananana's got both. He's going full charge mode here to try and kill his opponent as quickly as possible, and with what? 9 damage, it would be not lethal, but incredibly close to it, even just on the following couple of turns.
want to say that Spellstone hasn't been upgraded yet.
It has not. Still got that pattern on the side that kind of looks like the Triforce, which lets me know it's a lesser Spellstone.
Oh, you're totally right, actually. I never noticed that.
Yeah. But now for NightBreaker, making a play here by going for the Voodoo Doll and the Doomsayer, which obviously leaves him way less vulnerable to silence, because no matter what, this Archivist is dying, basically, on the following turn.
Other than double Spellbreaker, this pretty much ensures that
Yeah,
the
okay,
Archivist
fair
dies.
enough, fair enough. Which, you know, with 10 cards in hand now, I believe, you know, you kind of need to start anticipating those slightly more fringe scenarios. But it does look to me like this is going to be a dead Archivist. He could, however, try and clear off the Doomsayer on this turn to leave him with a nice board, or he could just go for face here, try and finish his opponent off with double Druid of the Claw on the following turn. This is a cool play. This is a very cool play.
He puts that Greedy Sprite down to ensure that he goes right to 10 mana.
Yeah.
If he can get through the double Druid of the Claw, then even if NightBreaker puts down Voidlord on turn 9, Ultimate Infestation can go right to face and end the game that way as well.
However, Druid of the Claw is a transform effect, so the Keleseth buff would not be applied.
Yes.
So it is not lethal. It would be only 8 damage, I believe, on the following turn, which changes things quite drastically, actually, because if you were setting up for a potential lethal on this turn, I would absolutely love this play from Zanananana, definitely be the way to go. And even though he's doing this before the potential for Voidlord, because it's only turn 8, only 8 mana available, it was still never going to be a victory on that turn.
It wouldn't have been, but that's sort of what I'm saying, right? You double Druid of the Claw. If NightBreaker doesn't put up a taunt here like Rin or Stonehill, you go face, and then Voidlord comes down on 9 potentially, and then Ultimate Infestation ends the game.
Okay.
So you're looking at a potential 2-turn. It's a 2-turn that there is a lot of ability for NightBreaker to play around, but you know, maybe that is one path towards finishing the game.
A good point. But this has gone more or less as bad as it could for Zanananana, I suppose. Taunt into Voidlord, which I am expecting to come down unless there is some kind of a ridiculous Godfrey board play, which it always seems like there is. But I don't know, in this scenario, it feels kind of difficult to achieve.
4, 6, 10. Kind of hard to bridge that.
You're missing
right there.
You're missing 2 tiers. You're missing the 1 and 2, and the 7 and 8.
And I would have to imagine that Zanananana has a copy of Spellbreaker in this deck, at the very least.
I would definitely agree with you.
If not 2. Although I suppose with double Druid of the Claw and Leroy, you do need to make cuts somewhere.
Something's got to go, yeah. And, you know, with double MCT, I think he's running as well. A lot of the other tech cards do seem to be there. But yeah, like you say, probably something like a Spellbreaker, something of that ilk going.
Yeah, if you're keeping up Warlock, Spellbreaker is just too valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Going with the Voidlord, just hoping it's enough to keep him in play. You know, he was thinking, I think, the same thing as us. Maybe there's a Godfrey here that could clear off the board, because that would obviously be the premier scenario for him, to leave him in a position where he doesn't just die to a silence effect. Obviously, we can see at the moment he would still be alive if Spellbreaker was here, because it would be 1 damage off lethal with a charging Druid of the Claw as well. So still, it appears to me, no ability for a potential lethal for Zanananana. But if you wanted to, we could just see an Ultimate Infestation on this turn. You burn 1 card, so what? And give yourself an almost 100% chance to have Spellbreaker on that following turn, which is clearly what he's toying with here.
We've already seen 1 cube Dark Pact this game onto the Mountain Giant earlier. So Zanananana would Ultimate Infestation, look for that Spellbreaker, and then NightBreaker would essentially be forced to have something like Faceless, a second Voidlord, or Cube Pact.
Or maybe for Zanananana on this turn, he kills off the Voidlord, plays a Mind Control tech just because it's a card he can play, it's not bad. Instead, he is going for that 100% chance, basically, to find those tech cards he needs, as we do see double Spellbreaker. Yeah, it feels pretty important in this deck list, considering how many ridiculous tech cards you have thrown in there. And now for NightBreaker, what can he do to fight back against this very limited heal? He has to get a complete board play with Godfrey, I suppose. Or...
Oh, geez. Okay, is there a way to set up Godfrey plus Defile for a clear this turn? Voidlord can go into...
One of the Crypt Lords go down to 7.
6?
Yeah.
But you need to keep a 1 or 2 in place, so you can't Defile first.
I don't know. I'm not seeing it.
I don't think it's there.
And even if it is, like, we can see that doesn't matter, because unless he leaves his Void Walkers intact after clearing off the board, which I don't think is even possible, it would be double charged to just close out the game.
In which case, you run Void Lord into one of the Crypt Lords, you Defile, and then you cube.
Okay.
Just to get the 3 Void Walkers on board?
Yeah, I think leaving Void Walkers instead of a Void Lord has to factor in this turn at some point. That's always going to be a part of this turn.
Oh. So he could have he could have Spellstoned his Void Lord and then Defiled, and you kill the Crypt Lord, you kill the Void Lord, and you kill the Ghoul on board, which would have left, I think, 3, 1, 2 Void Walkers, I want to say, but I could be wrong, but I'm not positive.
Very possibly. One to look back on.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Zanananana is going to get the 3-0 victory there with the Spiteful Druid, and that makes for 6 Spiteful Druid wins in a row. People who have not brought Spiteful Druid not faring very well so far in round number 2 today.
I've got to be honest, I was told casting Dreamhack is hard, but so far, round 2, it's been 6-0, 2 3-0 sweeps with Spiteful Druid. This is, pretty simple stuff from these guys.
Casting 101. Spiteful Summoner on 6, win the game.
Easy peasy.
That does appear to be the direction that this round has gone in, but we have seen quite a bit more diversity than these last 2 matches would suggest, and it is only the second round of the day. We are ultimately going to be playing through 9 rounds of Swiss today and tomorrow, depending on how long round number 1 went and how long the remaining rounds left. Whether we do 5 or 6 rounds today remains to be seen, but the point being, we've got a lot more Hearthstone to come, and we are going to be covering 1 more match still in round number 2, as those first 2 did blaze by very, very quickly. So don't go anywhere, guys. The third match of round number 2 is going to be coming right up.